72nd meeting. Wow.
Hey, hello.
Hey. Excuse me. How's everyone doing?
Good.
Pretty good.
Actually.
Kind of on the road, but wanted to join as much as I am able.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Yep.
I'm trying to remember where we left off last time.
Deep, profound thoughts.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I definitely didn't finish my close, thorough read of this. It's quite dense, which is, I mean that as a compliment. It's like every sentence is meaningful and feels very like potent.
Right.
So, or like fertile is maybe a better word. Like much to think about. And I felt that way after more sentences than not. So I'm going very slowly.
There we go. Yeah, we were round here, as the song goes. We're around, I don't know, I guess like page 3 or so, 3 or 4 maybe. We'll pick up there in a second. Also, thank you, Amanda, for putting together this note page.
Oh yeah, there are still a lot of like placeholders that I need to fill out, but I do think that does contain everything basically that I've written down that is worth keeping. So there's a lot that I still need to add. I would love to, I guess this is something that others could do as well. Like finding places in things that we've already read that are particularly relevant to any of those ideas, and just like pasting quotes, just dumping some quotes in there that seem important for what we're getting at. And I did some of that, and there are some like unsorted quotes at the end. Yeah, that would be one thing.
Yeah, I know you have a limited time. You have to go earlier today, Amanda, is that right?
Yeah, like 9:30.
Okay. I think what I might do is just try to go over this document a little bit, just to kind of sort of keep it project related, and then we'll find a way back to the Maturana paper and such. But yeah, hello everyone who's here, Morgan's here. Any general updates we want to share? We didn't really meet last week. Last week I was in the Midwest, and my goodness, it was so dry around in Colorado, and people said it was dry, and I guess I just completely underestimated it. But I was so, I'll go on camera here for a second. I was like my face was just, you can still kind of see like just so broken out, and just like, whoa, like I couldn't drink enough to be hydrated. It was really unpleasant. And I think I had an allergic reaction at the hotel I was at too, because it was sort of like just dusty or something. But everything about it was like, there's no way I could have met last week, in part because I had a fun, something came up that I really want to talk about Friday. I needed to talk about it in a different space than here, but I know Morgan kind of mentioned meeting Friday, and I think Bradley's okay with meeting Friday to talk about some other papers and other things we wanted to do.
Sure.
I'd appreciate, I'd like to talk about it there because I'm not at liberty to talk about it here. But some really cool things that I like opinions on then. But for now, I'm just recovering. I've been trying to sleep as much as I can because I've just been so exhausted. It's like my skin and like my hydration were just so garbled up and flipped on their heads. So I'm happy to kind of be back in a little more, I guess, it's temperate and moderate, or just humid, or just enjoyable Boston, which I've acclimated to. But yeah, I'm happy to sort of be back in the swing of things after a very destabilizing week. And I didn't do anything this weekend except homework and try to recover. So as I say, it's kind of the first normal day back. But I'm happy to be here. So that's my update. How's everyone else doing? I know we did not meet last week, and we kind of, I believe last time we really just went through this Maturana's paper and kind of made some jokes at the expense of how dated it is, and thought about some of the nuggets of wisdom that it has still, in spite of that too. But how's everyone else?
I think good. Yeah.
Okay. I will be, give me 10 seconds. I'm going to get some more water because I'm saying this around how dehydrated I am. But I will be right back. And maybe if you want to maybe start talking about this, you can, Amanda, but I'll be right back.
Sure. So I guess my goal for this was just, right now it's really just to put all of the notes, all of the thoughts in one place. So the outline is also a work in progress, and I imagine that even at its most organized, this document will involve a lot of repetition and redundancy, which is fine. This was the best sorting for now that I could come up with. I don't know. I don't have too much to say.
One thing this would benefit from is to have like an acronym glossary, because I was kind of getting lost in the acronyms. But yeah, also like, having, and I know this is probably like further down, but like some of these citations, I guess maybe it's hard to know when to unpack something and when to like just kind of leave it alone. And everyone has this problem when they're writing. You'll talk about something in a point, on a bullet point, like this first bullet point below 1B and I. And that's like a lot of stuff that could be unpacked maybe into a couple points. But even when you do that, it's like you need to unpack it for the reader, or can you just summarize it and let it be? And this is just something everyone goes through. In this case, it's good to unpack most things, because it's going to be, just so you have a mindset like, okay, this is going to be unpacked. Maybe we just make a brief point on this, and try to make the best of a kind of like a short description. I think that's part of the battle in writing like really dense work, like what we were reading with Maturana's paper, is like, where does it need to be unpacked? Where can it be like summarized? And then how does that fit into what we want to do, kind of directly or indirectly?
Right. So I guess one thought with how to structure this document is I'd at least want to like have a few bullet points that could tell me how I would unpack it. In some manifestation of this. And that's why I think there would be a lot of like redundancy, and that's okay. Maybe I could even try to use like, I don't know, as this grows, because like I said, there's still a lot of placeholders. Maybe it would be useful to kind of like cite different parts of the document from inside the document to avoid repeating, like chunks of text. Kind of leave like breadcrumbs.
I think there's a way to like link within a doc, like, I don't know if notes would work, but like,
something like that. Or even just like, C 1A.
I think I agree with all of that, and I think in some ways I think this is very good as a, you gotta put all the cards on the table right now, and they're not organized, and they're not perfectly defined. I'm glad that you did this because now I'm going to go through this. I'm going to go through what's over here and sort of the notion space and try to put it into one. I will. I'm going to add things like I added this here, and I think I forgot what happened with it. This one about the universal translator thing is something that is separate to everything that I want to mention. Maybe today, maybe some other time, but I'm going to go through this and add some things, and then I guess what I wanted to do first also is in terms of some of the structuring, like a lot of these are, I guess, H2s and 3s here. Like, are you okay with me trying to add to the structure specifically, or do you want to keep the structure in a specific way? Because
No, if you think there's a better organization, what do you mean by structure? Like the use of the headings, like more headings or less?
yeah, basically that. In part because basically what I might do is just add things below here, so I don't have to interfere with. You can't see my hand. I don't have to interfere with the outline. I can just add some stuff like below. Like I can add a heading here or something, and then we can sort it in later.
Sure.
I'm mostly just saying that because I've been going through these sort of the different tabs in the Notion space sporadically over the last while.
Yeah, if there's anything in
However,
there that you think I missed, do add it because I don't know, I've looked at some of that stuff so many times that some of it doesn't feel particularly
right,
important. But if there's something that is not, that seemed important to you that was not moved over, then yeah, do please add it.
because one of the things that I would like to do, and I'm saying this kind of for myself in the project admin hat or whatever we want to call that. Like there's these active questions here. Like if we remember these things, like these are still kind of in like this page with the questions, which is a little bit unwieldy at the time. I really like to go through this and basically tune it up a bit and see where we are now, because some of these are quite. We still have our project one. We still have our potential projects, and thinking about what we want to do. There's a lot of structure here that is sort of not totally coupled or engaged right now. And I'm not really saying I'm in a little bit of a dilemma in the sense that I'm not saying I want to throw this all away, nor do I want to just like, okay, now I want to go back and write boom, 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 and connect. Okay, everything in this table has to be connected to like a document. I don't want to do that either, but I want to kind of review this a bit and then really structure some of the documents or deliverables we're trying to write in terms of the paper pyramid again. And I'm also slowly building out, I don't know if we can say a cognition futures white paper. If you remember last Saturday, we talked about the immersive, Chicago UIUC, I think it was.
Yeah.
I forget how to like their white paper for like virtual reality stuff, and they're a big thing too. So there's something like that too for cognition futures to be a little more tied together with that I am working on. So to come back to this document and to today, yeah, I'm really appreciative that you just did throw this together. And I'm going to continue to add. I will stay in suggest mode to just like when I add things here, because I want to kind of, and it'd be a good way to do it so you can, veto or check that. But I may add some other things here too, just in case. I don't have anything exactly right now here, but I think one thing I might add is basically, and it may be covered in some of these things, especially like these areas, but sort of like I think in this space, whether it's for and maybe the scoping should be what I'm about to say as a part of this paper versus this paper and then what I'm about to say later. But I think something like something along the lines of what is like the lineage and the legacy specifically, and we talk about that up in here, up in here, in a sort of direct and indirect way, and it's somewhere in the notion here too, but sort of like why, maybe even like Maturana now, but like Maturana to Varela to Depraz, and why did Depraz go with like, you know, the cardio phenomenology and everything else here that we've kind of talked into? Why, how does it tie to, you know, the relationship to literature? I think maybe is a specific, maybe it's just this, but also just specifically really identifying like the tree branch that has led to these specific things that we want to do.
Yes, that is
yeah.
one section where those are such placeholders for so much. But I think that would be important to spell out also, because there's quite a few like manifestations of something that's kind of like neurophenomenology, like psychology, that includes more subjective reports and stuff like that. It just like kind of fails to live up to some of our standards. And so I think this would be a good chance to like contrast with some of that. And also what kicked this off was that paper by Martini that's like, even within this neurophenomenological project, like it's not radical enough. And here's, you know, the type of work that Varela would endorse, and here's how like things are lacking.
And yes, exactly. And one question about continental phenomenology is that, I guess I should just say, what is that relative to other things? And then
So,
specifically
like,
another thing to say about it. Yeah.
Those other authors, I guess by continental phenomenology, I mean what those other authors reference, like Husserl and Merleau-Ponty. And probably more people.
Speaking of, let me see. Oh, my phone isn't here. I found a pretty decent treasure this week in a used bookstore, which is one of MMP's lectures on like childhood psychology and development when he was, I don't know, at some location. But it was a very good deal. That was a reasonable price. It was a used book of his lectures at that time. One of the things I would say from that, just that's on my mind, is like, it's really cool because he keeps constantly referencing anthropologists in ways that modern cognitive science doesn't seem to. So that was funny. They were interesting. But yeah, okay. I was gonna ask about this because I would even say like I sort of I'll just do Jesse question or something. Even situating, because I'm in some of the stuff I'm doing regarding the DSM, there's a little bit of situating I'm interested in or kind of trying to do, I suppose, along the lines of like what phenomenology was around the turn of the century in, I don't want to say continental, but in Europe, and like the German phenomenology school, which I think Husserl is sort of part of, but like that. This is not a main point, but it's something that I'm kind of brushing up on from a different angle and want to just mention there. So I feel like what's cool about this document is like, this is sort of the embodied phenomenology project or neurophenomenology project, and I do want to see it as that. But I think and this is kind of what I was trying to say earlier, like some of the things like especially relationships to literature, like I think this, some parts of this could literally be like the almost like an excerpt from our master document on phenomenology at like the lab or the question figures. Here is our sort of master document on phenomenology that has a lot of these things. And I don't really know what to call that because it's not a paper. It's more like just a long, more than an annotated bibliography. But like I think I'm interested in building out those structures because I'm starting to see now how to just make structures like that there's sort of a larger database that you can pull from it what you want and then share some notes on it too, and then make specific smaller deliverables, which is kind of what this is. But either way, building this out here will have a lot of use. So I'm glad to start doing that. Anything else here to mention?
I guess one other task that I need to work on that would, where like it wouldn't be too hard to help, is like finding papers that we've gone over maybe on Saturdays, just things that might be related and linking them. So like not even having to read them and include relevant quotes, but like just, I don't know, throwing some into the document. And then I can check them out, or maybe from the Slack also. So like I'll work on that too, but that would be an easy way to contribute.
Okay. No, this is good. Like this is, I know it's whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. I know this is sort of not, this is just a big slab of, marble that is not defined yet, but I can see where it should go. And I think it will lend us to doing some things here. And speaking of, let me look to see if this is one that we can do here or not. No, it's not the one. I was gonna. This is HCI stuff, but this is more like biometric data. There's one other one that came up. That might have been. Wasn't there one? I'm looking in the call for enrollment stuff. No, that's collective behavior. Maybe it was this one. I don't. Psychology, neuroscience, mixed reality, HCI, biosignals. So I don't know if this is a place we could submit anything neurophenomenology related to or not. I think it might be other things, but I was looking for a place. Obviously, we have embodied intelligence coming up, which would probably be the most likely place to try to submit a presentation to further the project in that sense.
Yeah.
But to be continued on that front. Okay, anything else you wanted to mention for this document? I really appreciate that it exists now. You can keep doing things with it here. Okay, yeah.
So do you know what the deadline is for submitting abstracts to the Embodied Intelligence Workshop? Because I think we're about 4 weeks out from it. So
honestly, I feel like I don't think there is one. Let's see. Whoops, spelled it wrong. I feel like it's it's kind of just like get it in there for a while and then try to find a spot. I think you can, when you register, you can basically submit some in there. If you want to contribute a presentation, you can. So I would say maybe then I would suggest in like, I don't know, 2 weeks or kind of the start of March, a little bit after the first week of March would be a great time to aim for that. But there isn't really a cutoff. they just kind of keep adding breakout rooms and try to organize it somewhat. But we can ask them too, how to do that. It looks like it's pretty much the same setup as last time, and you're just going to be crammed in one of these breakout sessions on the 20th, the 21st, or maybe the 22nd. So I'll put that up here.
I cannot commit to being in charge of this, to being able to go to the conference or present. I can obviously help, but
that's okay. I can try to spearhead it more. Oh boy. Oops. Yeah. Okay. Then that's to be continued a bit. Okay. Anything else here before we move on?
I don't think so.
Okay. So on to Maturana's Biology of Cognition. We kind of, this is sort of the one where we kind of were laughing a bit about how it's like, oh, you'll know as you go what I'm talking about, and looking at what is cognition, how does it, when the knower, and things like that. Any strong feelings from last time we want to talk about before diving further into his sort of, I guess, section 3 here.
It's one general comment I have is when we've been talking about how, like, what a cybernetic ontology could contribute to cognitive science, like if we try to carve nature at its joints with inspiration from cybernetic concepts, like what would that look like? And I feel like this is exactly what that would look like. So I've appreciated that, like the concepts he's taking to be fundamental are I don't know, are things like feedback and the agent versus environment and coupled interactions, parts and wholes. But it's really my impression, even though maybe this impression comes from not fully understanding certain parts of it. But my impression is this is like very rigorous, like very deductively valid. Like he's connecting all the dots. So he's presenting these concepts as fundamental and then explaining very well how they link together and lead to his conclusions.
I'm gonna switch this for a second and use this here. It's a little bit more.
Yeah, this was kind of at the tail end of the big cybernetics boom, as you might say, like all the stuff we've read in the 50s and 60s, and then we're in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and now in the 70s. He's writing this.
Right, he's definitely a part of that tradition.
Yeah.
Specifically, second order stuff, like the role of the observer.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's a very interesting, I like the point about the niche last time. I guess about where we left off, but basically, living systems are units of interactions. They exist in an ambience. From a biological point of view, they cannot be understood independently of that part of the ambience with which they interact, the niche, that nor can the niche be defined independently of the living system that specifies it. It's in the metabolism. And I guess it's a bit like, there was a bit more here. I can't quite see. We're talking about homeostasis. I guess we'll just start here. Due to the circular nature of organizational living system is a self-referential domain of interactions, self-referential systems. Okay. Oops. Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Okay. Each internal state that requires that certain conditions, interaction with the environment, be satisfied. Oh, this is a very okay. Each
I think
internal
there's a
state.
missing parenthesis.
What's that?
I think there's a missing closed parenthesis. I was
Okay.
stuck on that for a minute.
Yeah.
I like that bit about prediction, though.
Or up here, or
No, that you were about to get to. It was
yeah,
interesting that prediction was like a core concept.
move this around. What's this here? Yeah, so I get set prediction up here. If this does not happen, the system disintegrates. The predicted interaction does not take place. The system maintains its integrity with respect to the observer, identity with respect to the observer. And there's a new prediction. In a continuously changing environment, these predictions can only be successful if the environment does not change that which is predicted.
So did we go through the whole thing about the observer last time, or did we just kind of gloss through that?
We talked about it, but I don't know if we handled it as seriously as we could have. I guess is one way to say it.
Well, I mean, I think some of the answers to that are in this, like the living system is in the observer. And I mean, it doesn't, you didn't see before, we didn't know that there was. So, I mean, I was just noticing that there are a couple things that they talk about in this observer section. So, like, one of the things is they talk about the entity, which I assume is the observer. And then the observer is maybe talking to another observer, or they're observing the system. And then they're in this interaction. So I like the sort of the definition of causality being that causality kind of changes. So like if I'm in a interaction with someone in a conversation, or if I'm trying to control something, it's not a static thing. Everything changes, and sometimes things can change radically between interactions. So you have to interact on this domain that's always changing, and that's the circular causality. It's not enough just to make like a cause and effect, and then if I cause, say, like this mouse to move across the table, I'm pushing a mouse here, that will always do that because it's like the mouse is static and my hand just has to move, and I can make that prediction. But if the mouse was, continually being put onto a new type of surface, maybe one the different colors or like different hardnesses of the surface, the mouse might not always move the cursor on the screen, and so that prediction is not good. But that's because the circularity has been broken, or the circularity hasn't been accounted for. So that's some of the things I see here. So there's this idea of all sort of relations as so it's almost like a set of relations that you're trying to build, and that's where the circular causality is mapped to. And then from that you can get some of these things like prediction and some of these other things that are going on.
Yeah. I think that is a good tie into the prediction discussion. And also, like, I guess it's going to go back to the niche in terms of, it's almost like niche as not necessarily environment, but sort of arena of environment and observer, potentially plurals, and entities in the niche, defined by the classes of interactions into which organisms can enter. The environment is defined by the, what's that?
I said that sounds like an affordance to me.
Yeah. It's almost like niche is like the set of affordances available, right?
Yeah.
Let's write that. Which again, it's, and I don't know if he's saying this explicitly yet, or just I'm implicitly going there, but he seems to be saying, getting at how this is, I wish I could move this thing out of the way. Where was it? Each internal state requires that certain conditions, interactions with the environment, be satisfied in order to proceed to the next state. Thus, if this does not happen, the system disintegrates. And what he's saying system is he basically meaning the whole, I think what I said about like the arena, which has the environment, which has the affordances available, which has the observer or the entity that can like perceive the affordances. I don't know if that's exactly what system means here, but maybe we can try to find that. The niche, again, is this class of interactions where kind of, okay, is that affordances? The environment is defined by the classes of interactions into which the observer can enter and which he treats as a context for his interactions with the observed organism. The observer beholds organism and environment simultaneously, which I think is actually, I know it's sort of an obvious thing to say, but I think that's actually kind of almost not. I'd be really curious how that ties in even like the Martini critique a bit. Like the fact that, I think it's just the way it's written here, but even like it makes me think quite about Fuchs and everything else he's trying to get at with all this, it's all together. But I think putting it in this way is sort of, yes, it is the environment and the, I don't know, organism at the same time. And he considers the niche of the organism that part of the environment which he observes to lie in its domain of interactions. Accordingly, as for the observer, the niche appears to be part of the environment and for the observed organism, the niche constitutes the entire domain of interactions, and such cannot be part of the environment that lies exclusively in the cognitive domain of the observer. This feels like very, very particular, like almost a regulator theorem type discussants about sort of like the structure of a relational database kind of a deal. Niche and environment then intersect only to the extent that the observer, including instruments, and the organism have comparable organizations. Yeah, but even then are always parts of the environment that lie beyond any possibility of intersection with the domain of interactions of the organism. And there are parts of the niche that lie beyond any possibility of interaction with the domain of interactions of the observer. I'm trying to, this would be something great to sort of Venn diagram out a little bit, because I get it, but also I'm reading this and I feel like, is there supposed to be a parenthesis or a comma somewhere? It's a little strange to read in this setting. Thus, probability system, its organization implies a prediction of a niche, and a niche thus predicts a domain of classes of interactions constitutes its entire cognitive reality. So where will we put, how will we tie in how will we put affordance? We'll finish the paragraph and we'll say, where can we put affordance in here? If an organism interacts in a manner not prescribed by its organization, it does so as something different from the unit of interactions defined by its basis circularity, and this interaction remains outside the cognitive domain, although it may well lie within the cognitive domain of the observer. So there's some strong claims being made here about the domain or the niche that the organism is supposed to be interacting in, and what affordances are there that it's supposed to do, and how that's related to its quote unquote cognitive domain. And is it too much to say that the cognitive domain is essentially commentary on the affordances that the organism knows and is familiar with and is attempting to exert a control, attempting to manipulate, attempting to I am going to change my state by attempting to interact with the environment in this way. Thus, that's my domain, and I have control here that I'm attempting to do. But he seems to be saying also that an observer who is not the organism or the domain, seeing an activity outside of here, might be able to see discrepancies about this, even if it's clear to the observer but not to the organism. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's also that you have to have a correspondence between the organism and the environment. So if the organism can change relative to the environment, then it changes. If it doesn't, then it fails. And that's where we talk about good regulation, because maybe it isn't good regulation. So it's not. It's not always great, perfect regulation or good regulation. Yeah, he mentions in here, what was the line that he said, something about that they have to share sort of a compatible organization. So remember those diagrams that we had a while back where we had like the controller and the controlled, and they had like the number of discrete states, and like if they're not the same number of states, that it's like there's not a good integration of the two. That's what I go back to, like so for example, if we have like a controller with 5 states, it can maybe easily control something else with 5, like a domain with 5 states, because it can map each state to the it can map each state to the state of the domain it's trying to control, and that's it can just predict that from the interaction. So it's like, okay, this is clearly state 2, this is state 2, this is state 3, and so you have this model. Then you can use that to regulate the behavior of the thing that's being controlled. If the controller has like 2 states or 20 states, then that introduces different types of problems, because the control domain is sending information back to the controller that's like, this is state 17, and then how do you map state 17 to a controller with 2 states? Or if the controlled, the controlled domain is 5 states, how do you map that back to any one of 20 states? So you get these kind of like aliasing effects and undersampling effects, and it's not very good regulation. I think of it like when you're trying to learn a new skill and you try all different types of things, and you kind of jumble through a bunch of combinations, and then finally it clicks. It's because you kind of distilled things down to the right number of states to learn that.
Yeah, I hear you. But I have a question too. I wonder if he's going to get into, or if people know or whatever, like we're kind of talking about the observer here in a sort of, like, there certainly are observers that could be more or less omniscient, let's say. Like an observer that's totally aware of all the range of different possible affordances that could take place, versus a more naive or just an observer who does not comprehend what's going on. Like I think that's a little bit more not the point that's being discussed here, but I'm curious how, like, what does the sort of abilities or comprehensiveness of the observer have to say about this sort of thing too. So I guess point 6 is all about this sort of, I'll put it here too. Yeah. Okay, and then to point 7, every unit of interaction, and what does he call units of interaction? Living systems as units of interactions. I guess he's saying living systems are units of interactions? Or what was the unit of interaction? It is the circularity of organization that makes a living system a unit of interactions. Okay.
Basically, the living system is, I don't know, a system made of parts that are interacting, is how I understood that. Yeah. Like it is one thing, but it is a complex thing with moving parts.
So okay. A living system defines through its organization the domain of all interactions into which it could possibly enter without losing its identity. Basically, if you have a very simple system with 36 combinations, that's a very small number of combinations, but it has to pick one of those to configurations, or else it isn't the thing that, if you were to say, for example, take a bacteria and engineer it, to have express a gene that's maybe you knock into it. And then, it may or may not work because that living system doesn't have that. That's not one of the states, or it can't mimic one of the states that's already there. Something like that. I'm just using a very simple example, but.
Where did he say a living system defined through its organization? Was that over here, or was that in 3, 4, or 5? You quoted it at the start of that. I just couldn't see where it was.
It's in 3, I think.
Okay.
So yeah, it's down next sentence.
Yeah. There we go. Okay. So now moving on to 7 again. Every unit of interaction can participate in interactions relevant to the other, more encompassing units of interactions. If in doing this, a living system does not lose its identity, its niche may evolve to be contained by the larger unit of interactions and thus be subservient to it. If this larger unit of interactions is or becomes in turn also a self-referring system in which its components are subservient to its main maintenance as a unit of interaction, then it must be or become subservient to the maintenance of the particular organization of its components. Thus, a particular self-referring system may have the circular organization of a living system or partake functionally in the circular organization of its components, or both. We mentioned bees. Third order self-referencing system of its kind, it has circular organization superimposed over the second order self-referring systems that are bees, which in turn have circular organization superimposed over the first order living systems that are the cells. All 3 systems within the domains of interactions are subordinated both to the maintenance of themselves and to the maintenance of others.
That part in particular reminded me of Fuchs. Vertical versus horizontal causality.
So big and clunky.
That
Yeah.
part's also interesting because, and I guess this also shows up in, you know, the title of Fuchs's book, Ecology of the Brain. But last time we talked about how in cybernetics there was kind of a disunity, a split between, I think maybe one of the names mentioned was Bateson, but like the more like ecology focused cybernetics versus more like computational, maybe information theory. I forget exactly how they carved it up, but one of the chunks was ecology. So this kind of when we're talking this abstractly, I can see more clearly the unity between the ecological kind of cybernetics and maybe what turned into the more computation heavy cybernetics.
And that would be Norbert Wiener.
Right.
Oops.
And more like control theory, engineering focused stuff. Maybe like the STEM version and then the soft science or social science version.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to. I would love to, and I don't know if I'm going to do this, but I would love to take this. We have this split, this split here, and I think maybe I'm actually going to make a note of that. I'm going to take a screenshot of this right now and put into the cybernetics reading group because I would like to come back to this specifically, and just. Like, I think that's a really interesting split, if you will, and I'm curious. I don't know if I just have the book in my hand. I don't think it's going to be something I'm going to dive deeply into. But a sort of related question is sort of, you know, I'm curious how the Maurice Merleau-Ponty book that I have, and I always find some of the most interesting parts of those books is like the introduction or the preface or the translator trying to situate the work. And what's really, that's basically what I read so far of that book. And it's sort of, it's called Social Psychology and Pedagogy. It's about a bunch of lectures Maurice did at the time in like, I think, I don't know, around the middle of the century somewhere. And just sort of, I'm starting to see these little like forks in the road towards whoops, press the wrong thing here. These sort of forks over for like ecological or anthropological, like I don't know, versions is too strong a word, or like almost like not quite packaging in a software sense, but like these distributions of these theories and why they did or didn't go in a certain ways. And I'm surprised at how much they're in the context of, like, you know, psychology or psychiatry, I guess, and what the Maurice Ponty book was talking about, but just the amount of times referenced for like anthropology in that context and what it meant, then I'm quite curious to find out about, because I think there's reasons why you know, computational and inertial reasons as to why things went the way they did. But yeah, anyway, to follow up there tomorrow, we are meeting tomorrow, is that right, for the cybernetics group or not?
Yeah, we didn't meet last week.
Okay, great.
But we haven't, I mean, we
Haven't
could
picked a
just keep
paper.
going with this paper. A couple weeks ago, we mentioned that we would, we like didn't even pick a type of paper we wanted to read. So it's still wide open, but I'd be okay just reading this one because it's the same, it's the same people, and then we don't have to take a long break in between. It's also, perfectly relevant. So
Okay, yeah. I mean, I guess I sort of stole it for this group anyway, so I'm okay with doing that. People can handle more Maturana. Or if something else, if something changes, let us know. As far as evolution, this is a separate heading, and we're going to get to cognitive processes next, hopefully. The cognitive function in particular. Interesting. Okay. Evolution, part 1. Are these just by paragraphs? Oh, are these all paragraphs? Okay. Anyway. In living systems is a result that aspects search for organization for maintenance of their basic circularity. Reproduction, evolution are not essential for the living organization, but they're essential for the historical transformation of the cognitive domains. Interesting. Essential for historical transformation of the cognitive domains of a living system on Earth. So that appears to basically be a strong allusion to like phenotypical differences in activity, and then that shaping longer trajectories of change, I guess. Yeah. Must suffer internal change. Conversely, internal change occurs in a unit of interactions, which are living systems. If an internal change occurs in a living system without losing its identity, it does so. Its domain of interactions changes. The living system suffers an internal change without a loss of identity in the predictions brought forth. A system changes only if its domains of interactions changes. I actually really like this because this is language I can use to describe one of my deep interests, because I think this line particularly for me makes me think this is not the same as new information existing in the system. It's not the same as a new stimulus necessarily acting, or a new, even to an extent, an affordance. It's almost like the domain of interaction has to change in the sense of an internal change, and the recognition or something about the affordance has to be sort of activated or not. It's not just presenting with information, or presenting with an affordance, or presenting with whatever. So that's for me to come back to, I think. After reproduction, the new unit of interactions has the same domain of interactions the parental one. All right. Conversely, the new unit of interactions has a different domain of interactions only if its organization is different, hence it applies different predictions about its niche. Predictions about the niche are inferences about classes of interactions, maybe affordances. Consequently, particular interactions are indistinguishable from organism, may be different for an observer if he has there we go, that's what I mentioned before, a different cognitive domain, and can be described them in a different elements of a class defined by the cognitive organism. These changes may bring about a production of offspring that different set of interactions with the parental.
Oh yeah, I liked that line. If this is the case and a new system thus predicts a niche that cannot be actualized, it disintegrates. Like I read that as meaning if the offspring isn't fit, if it has some if it's different from the parent in such a way that it can't fit into the niche, or rather that its niche doesn't exist, like the environment that it is designed for lack of better words, is not the one it is in, then it is no longer, it disintegrates.
There's something here that I'm not, I think I'm just going to make a very small note on the side, and I don't really want to talk about it because it's something that I do want to talk about, but it's not going to be of any use right now. There's something here that I feel like is there's some indirect commentary on the agent's relation to sense of agency about this process, particularly in the intergenerational sense, that is worth exploring, but not. I don't really want to get into right now. Okay, man. I don't know if you wanted to. Should we try to finish this, or is it to go right now?
No, let's finish 5 and then.
5, yeah, okay. So finally, part 5 for evolution before cognitive process, we have what changes from generation to generation in the evolution learning systems are those aspects of their organization which are subservient to the maintenance of their basic circularity but do not determine it, and which allow them to retain their identity through interactions. That is, what changes is the way in which these basic circularity is maintained and not the basic circularity in itself. The manner in which living systems is compounded as a unit of interaction systems, whether it is by single or basic unit, or through the aggressive aggregation of numerous such units themselves, living systems that constitute a larger one, or still through the aggregation of their compound units that form self-referring systems in higher orders and societies, nations, is of no significance. What involves is always a unit of interaction defined by the way in which it maintains its identity. The evolution of living systems is the evolution of the niches of those units of interactions defined by their self-referring circular organization, hence the evolution of the cognitive domains. Wow. So what do we think about that? If Amanda has to step away.
Yeah, I have a comment here on so what he thinks about as sort of unit of interaction and reproduction. So he gives us example before the evolution part on like bees in a bee society or social insects. So they have actually 3 levels that he's looking at, and there's like this order. So like the first order is like the cells, the second order is like the organism, the third order is like the society, the imperative, behavioral imperatives. So you think about that in terms of like what he's talking about later. He's talking about reproduction. He's talking about things like that. But then, he talks about like, well, if there's not, if things can't be predicted, the system disintegrates and all this. And I'm thinking about this as like, I think maybe he's not thinking in the same way that a lot of people are thinking about like, a lot of people when they talk about vertical biology, they think about like, or the vertical organization of biology, they think of like genes, phenotypes, which would be like cells, and then societies, and it would just kind of go up like that. If you think about like E.O. Wilson, how he described sociobiology, that's sort of the organizational order. And so, but what Maturana seems to be talking about is maybe something else. That it's not like, that you have these different mechanisms at different levels. And indeed, you can get, you can have, say, like mutations in an offspring that don't disrupt their circularity. You can have mutations that, destroy that circularity. So it isn't just so much the set of relations at one level versus another. It's just that there's something going on there that either Maturana is not being specific enough about, or that his model isn't really mapping to what we think of as like genes, phenotypes, behavior, and it's some other property of the organism that's sort of, maybe states out, states of being instead of like maybe what we might think of as mechanism. There's something I think he's maybe thinking about this in a very different way, maybe fundamentally so. And I think that's worth putting a pin in.
Yeah, I think that'd be something good to pick up next time when we're all back, because we can talk about some other things when Amanda's gone.
Okay.
Anything you wanted to say, Amanda?
I don't have anything to add for now. Yeah, feel free to go on without me. And so, do we want to just keep going with this tomorrow?
We can.
I'm okay with that. Unless something else comes up people want to do, we can.
Yeah, you can
keep writing through this basically.
share something else in the Slack, but I'll plan on finishing this.
Okay.
All right.
Right.
Cool. See you soon.
Talk to you later. All right.
Talk to you later.
To continue what Bradley said, I think there is something. It's really tough because I know where Varela goes a little bit, and I don't know. Like I can't plot in my mind, sort of like. I don't know if I can do this very well, but let's try. I can't really plot in my mind. Can I just move this whole thing? Yeah, let's move this. Nope. Yeah, let's move. There we go. I can't really plot well in my mind where, like, sure, let's just say N, like where along the line, because this is 1970, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is 1970, and I just can't really see where, like, I think the embodied mind was like late 80s or the 1995 or something.
Yeah.
So
2000. Oh yeah, it's 1995. I think. Okay.
Something like that. Like I kind of know around like here. I know this part, but it's really interesting for me to see what. Like I have some really big questions about why did Varela make the choices that he made to try to push his take on phenomenology or whatever first person work or the embodied mind? Because it's tough because I'm not really fully appreciating that in 1970, like the embodied mind book didn't exist. Like, I know factually that's the case, but it's hard for me to really put myself in like the land before time bit about like the land before embodied cognition. Like that wasn't from what I understand, like that wasn't really. This was very different ways of talking about it then, and it's different than what it's like. It feels different than how Varela's talking about, even though it's related to it, even though it's related to Fuchs. Like there's certain things that happened, like here, that I don't know. Like why did Varela lean in the direction that Varela leaned in, and not try to use some of the same language? Obviously, some of things became more refined. But there's something about what Bradley was saying that definitely feels relevant to me in the sense of like there's an effort to try to talk about the whole systems and or even this sort of, I don't know, it feels a little bit clunky to me, but maybe it isn't that clunky, but like a living system defines blah blah blah, its organization and the domain of interactions. Like there's very like good regulator vibes. There's very a particular framing of the organization, the environment, and the thing we're not calling affordances. And like I don't know if Maturana, I don't know when the word affordances really comes into play, or who coined it, or how it's related to Maturana or Varela historically. But we're kind of talking about those things here. So yeah, I guess I'm just saying, like, I'm really curious in the decade of the 70s when he's sort of, I think, teaching with and talking to Morel at that point, kind of like, why did certain things go the way they did?
Right.
Um, yeah.
I don't know if there's a connection between this and then the later work on phenomenology, but I do think the distinction Amanda drew out earlier about like the ecological track and the information track, and this seems to be going maybe it's even trying to reconcile the two, because it does seem like
Yeah.
it talks about ecology, but then also in very information type terms. Well, although I don't really know, I don't know how to spot like each flavor in the wild. I mean, but I think he is kind of making kind of a, he doesn't mention the ever good regulator theorem, but like that's kind of where this is. Yeah, we are making a lot of connections ourselves with that, and I think that's definitely kind of, I think where he starts talking about the observer. This
Right.
is kind of where you can see where, okay, if you propose there's an observer of a system, and that observer has to have some knowledge of the system, the whole organism. Now, suppose that observer is, some sort of yourself, where it's your own body. So now you're the one who's kind of regulating. So if you think about this whole thing as like your conscious intentions are the observer, your physiological system is the organism, and then the environment is outside. And then there's this, if that's the case, then phenomenology comes quite easily, because that's what you're trying to get at. Would you control your heart rate, or how would you do these things? Now, it's worth mentioning that maybe that isn't, maybe that's kind of a dead end in a lot of ways, because, can you really do those things? I mean, I don't know. And I think what Maturana is proposing to me is a little hazy in terms of like, what do you suggest that there's always like a conscious aspect to an observer, even if you're in a mechanical system or in a biological system, like inside of a cell? Do you need like, consciousness or cognition there? That's where you get a little bit more controversial. And I don't know. So, but I can see the path, kind of. I'm just not clear. I mean, relative to the history, I don't know exactly what it looks like.
Yeah. And I'm reminding myself as I'm saying this, like, because we read this over, like, in our life world living time, like we've been reading this paper over the better part of 3 weeks, or almost basically the better part of a month. And I'm trying to remember, like, I just went back and like, this is all part of part 2, the problem. Well, I guess, excuse me, part 2, it's not part 2 problem, it's part 3, cognitive function in general.
Yeah. So he's setting this up as like maybe as something that can be solved with cognitive function, maybe.
Yeah, and he's setting things up. He gets to the problem, which is this, which again is cognition is a biological phenomenon and it can only be understood as such. Any epistemological insight requires understanding. If an insight is to be attained, two questions must be considered. What is the function? What is it as a function? What is it as a process? So he gets in the function in general, and then he gets it the process later. So this is all in the context of the function.
Yeah,
apparently.
what you're talking about, yeah.
Okay, so that's important. It's important to like resituate my mind that way. It's we can either at this point we can either talk a little bit more about something we've already covered. We can talk about the Royal Society paper, or we can disclose early. I might have a few things to say about this, but I don't know how much you guys want to get anything else before. before we have 10 minutes left, basically.
Yeah, why don't we just finish up with this or some other thoughts about it?
Okay, there's a few. Just maybe just selfishly, I'm gonna go over these things I put in purple
Okay.
because what's really interesting here, and I really want to see who. I don't think this is unique to Maturana necessarily, but it's something about in the context of all this, the way it's coming up, it's striking to me, and I really like this bit about. It's funny because it's in the context of evolution too, and we talked about like phenotype, and I mentioned phenotype, and then maybe I even said it out of place because I'm not sure that's what he was really getting at the time. He says something here like he says how like it's not even uh, um, where was it? Yeah, reproduction and oops, I'm just going to cross out reproduction and evolution because they don't matter. They're not essential for a living organization, but they have been essential for the historical transformation for the cognitive domains of living systems on Earth. And I'm curious
What that means.
Yes. And I guess I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
But like the bit about systems changing only if the domains of interactions change, like that very much feels like something that I
Yeah, it's kind of hard to see the like you say, well, you know, you don't need reproduction and evolution, which are the like kind of the hallmarks of the definition of life. You just need living organization. And then, you know, that's essential for transformation of cognitive domains. But of course, cognitive domains have been transformed through evolution. If you look at a tree of it, you know, people have done studies where they've looked at like the evolution of neocortex across, say, primates or mammals, and you can see variations in how those structures are organized. They're not hugely different, but they have differences in how they end up being. So if you had, say, for example, a marmoset cortex, you know, you'd have a very different set of behaviors than a human cortex or a chimp cortex. So that's, but then, you know, he says, well, a system changes only if its domains of interaction change. So what is the domain of interaction? Is it separate from the anatomy? Is it separate from evolution? And if so, you know, how can you possibly, like, you know, how does that possibly happen? I mean, you know, I mean, I know you can have like adaptation, people can vary in terms of how they interact with their environment, things like that. But that's sort of microevolution anyways. And I think, you know, reproduction, particularly even with cultural evolution, is very important that you need to have, if you don't reproduce those, that living organization, it very much goes away. And yeah.
Yeah, and it's there's there's uh, there's some really like big things for me, and I'll just personalize it. Like for me, between what Bradley just said, what this means to me, because I feel like this means something very 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 specific to me, and I don't know what mantra necessarily means yet. And then this bit about sort of the agency of this um you know what happens here, like there's clearly a relationship between something implied here about the historical transformation of the cognitive domains, right? But you know, they are essential for this. They can result in this disintegration if the niche a niche that cannot be actualized, it doesn't happen. Okay. And there's something here. I wrote the word comprehension because comprehension is sort of like I don't it's more like a personal word in my definition, but like comprehension is something that I've been really interested in for a long time. It's not really intelligence, not learning. I don't know what it is. But like for me, there's something very specific about why the nature of why an organism with opportunities to do certain things does or doesn't, and it has to do a bit with what can be perceived as potential ways to go, and the perception has to do with its domain of interactions being actual feasible or tenable things. And you can go in, there's a lot of things here. There's I'll also mention like this is a bit of a further concept, but this whole disintegration stuff, and it's not getting into agency here, but there's some very interesting like you could I don't want to do it right now. I'm just doing it because we have extra time. There's sort of a metaphysical takeaway from this, or some sort of like a broader sense of much there's some pretty deep questions about sort of how much can the organism or its intergenerational systems of operating like try to choose something versus what is in the capacity of the organism to see as a choice to pursue. Like there's some lines earlier here about sort of like it's not as specific, and this whatever it is, it very much reminded me of certain parts of the things that Varela really resonated with him, and resonated with things like even sort of the appeal of I'll say Buddhism, I guess, but it's about it not necessarily being dogmatic, not about a specific set of procedures, but about a specific way. And I'm trying to find it in the text. I don't know if I will be able to find it, but sort of trying to find something essentially saying it's not about performing the same regulatory activities, but having sort of the same regulatory, I guess, impact, or maybe the best word for this section would be the function. Like at a functional level, that there can be some variation of regulatory activities, but the impact having the same sort of cumulative outcome. And there's something about that. At any rate, I could go on and on, but I probably will pause if anybody else wants to say anything, and we can wrap up for today. Any final thoughts before we conclude? Pick up tomorrow on the cognitive process. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I'll probably have more to contribute tomorrow. I've got a little family distraction here. Yeah.
That is fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll leave it at that, and we'll be back here in less than 24 hours. Whoa, boy, get ready. I'll see you all soon, and I'm looking forward to Friday because there's a few things I want to talk about, but also I do want to talk about the paper stuff too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Let's also. I mean, sorry, I didn't follow up on that too, which is to follow up on Discord or Slack in terms of setting the agenda and prep and things like that.
Okay, I'll say more about that too.
Cool.
But yeah.
Please, yeah. Give me any heads up you can in terms of prep, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks everybody. Take care, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Take care.
Bye.